This video includes spoilers for the main campaign, Fractured Futures, Kindred Ties, and Audric and Crom's adventurer stories. This is also a follow-up to my previous theory video that connects the Fractured Futures timeline to the main campaign, and I will be building off what I presented there, so please watch it first. Building off my last theory, the interlude from Chapter 13 has given us a little more information, but has also called into question something we've seen but not thought a lot about. Why does Future Zethia have two slightly different outfits? One has blue highlights and the other has white highlights. After reviewing which one appears where, today I'm going to theorycraft, and bear with me as this is just a theory, that there are two different Future Zethias from two different realities. I read the feedback from the last video, so this time I'm going to go a little bit slower, and I've drawn some diagrams to help explain things better. So I'm going to start by going over the types of realities once more. Each of these realities are classified by comparing them to a base reality. The type of time travel we see in Dragalia Lost is multiverse time travel, where when time is traversed, instead of directly changing your own past, you are instead changing events in a different reality that will have no bearing on your own. When traveling to a different reality, it's possible to enter one of three different types: parallel, branching, or alternate. Parallel realities are all identical in the events that occur in them, but are temporally offset from one another. Given a universal point in time, all of them will call a different instant in their timeline the present moment, and what we call the present will either have yet to happen or already happened in all other parallel realities. Closed time loops occur here, as traveling to one causes a different version of you to enter your base reality. A branching reality is a reality that, when compared to the base reality, shares any interval or intervals of time identical to the base without being entirely parallel. The most common case of this is when a reality permanently splits moving forward, but it's possible for realities to branch together, possibly multiple times, or even branch away and back together again. Additionally, when a reality branches, it doesn't merge or split with the base, it remains a separate timeline that either was or becomes identical, as opposed to becoming a single reality. Alternate realities are really simple. They have no exact moments in common. However, individuals can still travel between them, as every alternate reality has its own set of infinite parallel and branching realities. Before I get into the revised timeline, I also want to cover a few other facts. There might be a few branch timelines I don't cover, like where Kronos is not defeated and succeeds in killing Zethia, as we know this still occurs, then in a different reality he is defeated before he kills Zethia. So there must be at least two different Kronos as well. I also want to mention the method in which inter-reality travel has been shown to be accomplished. The most common way we've seen is the otherworldly fragment, known in Hinamoto as the Gleam Shard. This shard allows the user to travel to the space between worlds, but no further. We have also learned from Nobunaga's story that the Worm Clan leaders in Hinamoto use them to teleport around the world. Additionally, once a fragment runs out of power, the user is removed from the otherworld back to their original reality. Second, there are Dawn Shards. It's presently unclear if there's more than one per reality, but they could just be rare enough that they are referred to as the Dawn Shard instead of a Dawn Shard. Dawn Shards allow the user to travel through the otherworld, then further into a different reality. However, like otherworldly fragments, once they are out of power, the user is drawn back to their original reality. We know from Future Zethia that they can be powered by the user's personal mana. I'm also personally curious if a Dawn Shard was an ingredient for Kronos. Finally, there are gates. This appears to be a structure over a shard based on references to assembly, though both Audric and Crom's story call into question the portability. It allows the user to perform what is probably a one-way trip to a different reality, and breaks causality. With all that out of the way, I'll now explain my latest theoretical timeline. With two Future Zethias, one with blue highlights and one with white highlights, I believe that instead of two timelines, there are actually three. For starters, there is the timeline with no interference from a Future Zethia. The Zethia of this timeline will become Blue Zethia. This timeline likely follows the one I laid out in my last timeline video, where Aurelius sends Yuden after the Mistholt's Sacred Shard but does not meet Future Zethia. Aurelius gets possessed and kidnaps Zethia. Yuden moves to make as many pacts and allies as he can to save his sister. At the Binding Ruins, Yuden and company never show up. Zethia is possessed, and instead of dying to save Yuden, Aurelius, who has a better grip on the situation than Yuden eventually will, surrenders instead of sacrificing himself to save Yuden, who isn't there. Yuden continues to grow his power and eventually offers himself to the other to save his sister. The other forms Kronos and de-ages Aurelius into Audric, who either escapes or is rescued. Zethia and Aurelius make a plan to fight the other, locate a Dawn Shard, and decide to use time travel. The rest of that story should follow my previous theory. At this point, we enter the second reality. The Zethia of this timeline will become White Future Zethia. After Chapter 1 begins, Blue Zethia travels to Yuden's first Dragon Pact to try and stop it. When that fails, she tries again by sending him to the Binding Ruins in Chapter 5 to intervene, and lends a hand herself. By this point, Blue Zethia is foiled in one of two ways. Either she is killed by Kronos after her first interference, and the minimal alteration allows the timeline to branch back to the original, or she is struck by Zodiark in the Binding Ruins. It's unclear if this kills her, as she may have just run out of mana, but this is the last time we see Blue Zethia. Her death would also explain her absence in Audric's timeline, or the specific one from Audric's timeline may be the one that Kronos killed. Anyway, in the second timeline, Yuden is now at the Binding Ruins, and Aurelius dies to save him. However, when Zethia reappears here in the main campaign to teleport him to safety, she is wearing white highlights, so that doesn't happen in this timeline. Instead, there are several potential outcomes, but the one I find that works with the information we have is that Zodiark covers Yuden's retreat, and dies in the process. Then in this reality, Yuden once again bolsters his strength, dons his Gala uniform, and eventually trades himself for Zethia to the other. Without Zodiark, Kronos is not created in this timeline. And without Aurelius, Zethia is left to plan on her own and decides to try and restore her world by finding something in a different reality. This is the reality we see in the Chapter 13 interlude. The third and final timeline is the main campaign. I shouldn't have to explain this timeline as we can just read it from the game. This timeline contains both the interference of Blue Zethia, followed by the interference of White Zethia, whose major change is telling Yuden not to worry about her life, but to seek the Dawn Shard for his own, and also teleports them away from the Binding Ruins, which within this theory would save Zodiark's life too, among other possibilities. We also know that this is not White Zethia's first attempt to change the course of events, and it's currently unclear what else she may have tried, but she at least thinks that the reality of the main campaign has what she needs to fix her own. Additionally, based on what we saw, I would not be surprised if other possessed Yuden from her world made an appearance at the end of Chapter 14. Also on a side note, I think Crom's story is a different branch from Blue Zethia's timeline, as she appears with blue highlights in it and is not drawn away by causality, but this is a separate branch. That's where I stand with my current theory. Let me know if I'm missing any details that contradict with the theory, but if you do, please provide specific evidence. I'm open to reworking the theory or finding it to be incorrect, but just telling me you disagree doesn't help me fix it. I've seen another theory that the color of Zethia's clothing represents her mana level, but she's expressed being low on mana in both colors, so I don't think that's the case. The color difference is definitely important, as it's undoubtedly an intentional inclusion. Let me reiterate, this is just my personal theoretical timeline based on the information I've found, but I'm very excited to see what Chapter 14 brings, and if it lives up to its potential. Since Chapter 15 seems to be in the same story arc, possibly the end of it, I'm pretty sure Chapter 14 will end in a cliffhanger. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. And probably in the comments. Definitely in the comments.